on to our special guest. It is Mr. Kevin Fleming. Sir, how are you? Are you on the line?
I'm here, and I'm well, and thank you very much, and Happy New Year to one and all.
Oh, man. Happy New Year to you, sir, and thanks for joining us. A little about Kevin, and I'm going to let him tell it better, but I just want to set it up to say Kevin is a Minneapolis native and has an extensive career in radio, in the music business. And how we're going to tie some of this in is he also worked, I think he was a vice president at one time of Perspective Records, which for all of my real Prince Minneapolis cats know that is the record company that Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis had. So we want to definitely talk about that. And I got some questions about like Mint Condition and Sounds of Blackness and things like that nature. Yeah. So yeah, we're going to get into that. But Kevin, let me start here. I see that you are from Minneapolis. Is that right? What?
Born and raised.
Born and raised on
the north side of Minneapolis.
Okay.
And we have a thing in Minneapolis where we say NFL, Northside for life.
Oh, is that right? I never heard that.
So I'm a part of the NFL, Northside for life.
Okay.
But coming up in Minneapolis was an interesting experience, especially as a young man, in high school, or actually, in the 70s.
Okay.
Minneapolis was, the great Northwest, the great city that many African-American people didn't really know much about. There weren't very many there.
Right.
And for those that were there, you had to deal with, the fact that you're in a very small minority. And while it was a very liberal place and there were opportunities, it was also very isolating. And, our music really wasn't featured, was showcased. There wasn't a lot of, the tours that were going on at the time really didn't come through Minneapolis a lot.
Okay.
Because, of course, the population didn't support all of that.
Right.
So we didn't really have what you would call and traditionally know as black radio. We had very little. So as a young man, who enjoyed music, we would hang out at a record store. We'd go out and, your cousins from Chicago or New York or Detroit or L.A. or wherever would tell you about these new acts.
Right.
And you'd be like, well, I don't hear them on the radio because our radio was only, we only got 4 to 6 hours of radio a day because we were on we had an AM daytime station called KUXL.
Okay.
And on KUXL, the DJ would come on, and it was brokered time. So he would buy the time, come on, do his thing, and when he went off at the end of the day, the station shut down till the next day. So you'd only get this 4 to 6 hours worth of music every day.
Wow.
At that time. So we were very limited in what we were exposed to. And then, of course, you integrate into that what you are exposed to. So there was a lot of rock, a lot of grand funk, a lot of, Led Zeppelin, whatever was happening at that moment. We obviously were exposed to that because that was always around us. So when you incorporate into that, the things that we knew about, the James Browns and the Motown sound and it was right at the beginning of the funk era, and so many elements were coming into play at that time. All of that tended to have an impact on us as young men and women who appreciated music.
Let me ask you this question.
So, and then when you add to that the fact that 6 months out of the year it were snow outside,
right?
So that means you're inside. You got to do something. So that's what kind of was the laboratory, you might want to say, that spawned these musicians.
Right. Let me ask you this, Kevin. So during this time, when did you become now, are you a musician yourself, or have you any background?
No. I never Never tried to play. Everybody tried to play, when you're 15 years old.
Right.
I tried to pick up a bass and thought I could do something with it, but that didn't last long.
Okay. I got two questions for you. One would be, when did you become aware? And I'm curious because you're a native of that area, as opposed, a lot of times we talk to the musicians, we talk to Andre and people like that. But you being sort of not on the outside of seeing that camp, and I don't know if you're outside or not, but how did you become aware? When did you become aware of there's bands in my area that are playing?
Well, I got lots to tell you then.
Okay.
There's lots. You're going to be amazed by the end of this conversation.
All right.
As I said, I lived on the north side of Minneapolis. I lived right on what is Plymouth Avenue, which was a main drag, and Russell. And across the street, kitty corner from my house, I can go to my front door, look across the street, kitty corner, and see Andre Cymone's house.
Ah.
Andre Cymone's mother and my grandmother were best friends.
Wow.
I mean, for life.
Okay.
Worked together, hung out together. So our family, his family, tight. Know them all. Everybody.
Okay.
I've been at their house millions of times. They've been in my house millions of times. So it's not like I know you from across the way. I think I know you. No, I know you.
Right. Right. Okay.
His mama probably whooped my ass at some point in time when I was a child, and my mama probably smacked him on his butt. The whole nine.
I got you.
I went to grade school with Prince.
Ah.
We were in third grade together at John Hay Elementary School.
Wow.
My mother knew his mother. Long story, it's a small town in many ways, especially amongst black people. Mm-hmm. So most people knew each other, in some kind of way. So we knew Mrs. Nelson and her family, and we knew obviously Andre Anderson and his family very well. And there, Morris Day was not far away, and I knew him from school, and Gary Johnson and Terry Lewis and I played high school football together, and so anyway, we're all kids. When we were younger, we all would see each other. There was community centers and basketball leagues and football leagues and all of that kind of stuff. So all these kids would know each other in some kind of way, or seen each other, or been exposed to each other in some kind of way. So knowing about bands is because, again, we did not have radio, but we all loved music. And because of that 6 months inside, for the winter, there were a lot of guys who wanted to be musicians. Mm. So they would put together little bands and they would play. And there was a summer Battle of the Band series that, as I came up, and got, into high school, had gotten involved in as an MC. So I'm now one of the MCs for the Battle of the Bands. And one of the bands was Grand Central. Hmm. And one of the bands was Flight Time. Okay. And one of the bands was, a group called The Family. Mm-hmm. And there was a band called Back to Black that Sonny Thompson was in. Okay. Who later played with Prince. Yeah. So all of these guys knew each other. All of them played. All of them, shared something in the process. So yeah, we were aware of everybody, and there would be little dances, little things that you go to and you hear these guys play, and you knew about them. I mean, to be honest, Prince. You knew Prince was going to be great. And in fact, we didn't even call him Prince. He was Skipper. Right. Well, as we were coming up, we knew him as Skipper. Big fro, short, shy, but very talented. And in the third grade, I knew he was going to be something special because he just had skills that other kids didn't have. Mm-hmm. Now, I never saw when we first started hanging out, that young, the music skills because they hadn't been developed yet. But he was very good at drawing. He was excellent. And everybody at those days were into comic books. Oh, wow. So we all would be trying to draw superheroes. Interesting. And he was one of the better kids in the class that could draw superheroes. You knew that he was going to be talented at something.
Wow. Never heard that before. That's very interesting.
Oh yeah. So when at whatever time, and I don't remember the year it was precisely, but he had left his home. He lived on the south side of Minneapolis and moved in with Andre Anderson at his house. And Andre and they had a big house. There were a lot of kids, a big basement. So everybody would be hanging out, and he lived there. Now, like I said, I'm looking out my front door, kitty corner across the street, and there's Andre's house. We're hanging out together. We're all, kids. Our mothers and grandmothers and whatnot are all best friends. So, they're getting together for their little nip on Saturday night and hanging out, playing cards, talking trash, whatever it is the old ladies do. So the kids are always playing together. Now, we're down in the basement of Andre's house. Before there's any instruments, they're banging on cardboard boxes. So what I'm really trying to say is that being a part of that genesis, how it all began, to see it all develop was amazing.
Wow.
And it really kind of developed right before our eyes.
That's interesting perspective to be able to see it from your vantage point like that.
Absolutely. So let me go back to the part that where now we're getting to high school age, and there was a guy who for the life of me I can't remember his name. It was 40, 50, 45 years ago. But anyway, he had a program where he picked some kids at high school. I went to North High School. And you could come in at lunch hour and play music over the school system while everybody was having lunch. And he chose me. So this is how my introduction now to radio.
Right.
So I get to go up, play music, give the school announcements, whatever that was, shout out people, have fun. That was my thing at lunch hour every day while I was in high school.
What inspired you to want to do that? Was there something that you'd heard?
Well, again, my friends are now gravitating toward musicianship. They're all taking the music classes. They're all preparing themselves in that craft. My interest was not in music. I was in music, but not in the performance of music. So my avenue was to be the guy who presented it all. Now I'm the DJ.
Okay.
So that was where I found myself, more of the performance aspect, the plays and all of that kind of, that's where I kind of gravitated toward.
Okay.
So now I'm playing records and talking stuff and, and then it got to a point where there was an opportunity to do the community news on the radio station that was the one I told you about was the daytime station. And the guy that was the DJ and the guy that bought the time on the station, his name was Thornton Jones. But on the air, he went by Pharaoh Black. That was his name, Pharaoh Black. The fox in the box that rocks your soul, the funky, funky Pharaoh.
Yes, sir.
And we would sit there and listen to Pharaoh every day because he was cool. And Pharaoh brought on a dude that was at my high school that was a year older than me that was kind of like, the king DJ of the school, and that was Kyle Ray. Kyle Ray, the super DJ. And Kyle would come on when Pharaoh wasn't on the air and do a show, but they would want me to come on and read the community news. Now, I've made my little name at the school, but I ain't never made my name at the radio station. So my mother, because I was like 15, 16 years old, had to drive me because I didn't have a driver's license to the radio station. She would sit in the parking lot, and I'd go in and do the community news, for 10 minutes, and then we drive home, and she would critique me on the way home every day.
Wow.
And this is what I did. This was my introduction to learning about radio. Now, again, all my friends, the ones that I've mentioned here, they're all trying to do their music thing, and I'm trying to do the DJ radio party thing. So that we're still crossing paths. We're still running in the same circles. We're just doing different things. So as we, graduate, get older in high school and, become ready to graduate out, we're throwing parties and we're doing this, we're doing that. And then, of course, we still have that battle of the bands. So one year that, or over the years, as those same bands that I perform at this summer concert series, somebody would win the battle, somebody would lose the battle. And there'd be a lot of good feelings on one side and bad feelings on another side. Well, let me tell you about these bands. Flight Time was tight. They had their stuff together. They were pretty good. The Family was a funky band. Flight Time was solid. They were very good, very, they could do a little jazz, a little funk, doing the R&B thing, very strong. The Family was a little more, down in the hood, hardcore, R&B, James Brown kind of stuff, that was their thing. And then you had Grand Central, and they were a little more on the edge, a little more different, had their, more of a rockish kind of approach to it. But, when you're in the hood and you're doing the Battle of the Bands, people gravitate to the things that they know.
Right.
And they didn't really know the rock thing as well as, maybe Grand Central would have liked. So Grand Central always lost.
Interesting.
And that'd be Prince and Andre and Morris. And Andre's sister, Linda, was in the band. And there was other folks that evade me right now. But the point is, they very rarely won. They would be hurt.
What was the band that Sonny was in?
Sonny was in the Family.
He's in the Family. Okay, I heard that they was the ones that you didn't mess around with, like.
Oh no, Sonny. Now, God rest Prince of Soul. I love him, my brother. I've known him since we were kids, and I think he's probably one of the greatest musicians the world has ever seen. But when we were young, Sonny Thompson kicked Prince's ass.
Yeah, I heard he was the man.
Sonny Thompson was the baddest thing I'd ever seen.
Whoa.
Prince learned from Sonny Thompson.
Yeah,
Sonny was left-handed, and he could play his face off. But there were a number of guys that came around when we were young that were excellent musicians. And Prince had to learn. And I think a part of him getting his butt kicked as many times as he did in that Battle of the Band scenario certainly helped shape him and drove him to become as good and prolific as he eventually did.
Wow. When was it? So you guys are getting ready to graduate at this point, or you have graduated. Now, I wanted to transition to see where you were at. When Prince gets his record deal and puts out his first release, where were you at? Have you went to college at this point? Or
I had decided that, the Minneapolis scene was very small, and either you were going to make it, with that hustle you had, hustling parties or playing DJ in the clubs, even though you wasn't of age to be able to do it. And I was, sneaking in the club being the DJ, getting away with not being over 18. But at the time, I realized that in Minneapolis during those days, for a young black man, either you were going to make it as that musician or that entertainer, if you didn't have, the skills to be a professional athlete. And the only other alternative that for many of us saw was being, some kind of hustler on the street. There were many pimps and players and that kind of thing going on at that time.
Interesting.
And you would see that, and you would be exposed to that, and you'd be affected by that. And at one point in time, I said, either I'm going to go wrong or I got to go right. And the only right thing for me to do was to leave there and try to go better myself by going to college.
Now, were you?
I had that little taste of radio experience. I had spent some time on a little local community station that's still there today called KMOJ. I had done all those things, and I said there was an opportunity for me to go get a degree in communications with a concentration in broadcast management, and I left in 1976.
76.
And that was right around the time Prince was putting together his first opportunity.
Now, do you have brothers and sisters?
I have 3 sisters. All younger.
Younger. Oh,
now,
so
my
you were
sisters knew them, all of them. It's funny even to this day. I have a sister that lives in Phoenix, and she kind of works in the entertainment business, and she sees, the guys that are still touring. Morris Day and Jerome Benton, and Jerome was my little brother in school, and we hung out, and Terry was my big brother at school, and we were playing football together and all of that. So to see them today, we got such a great history, and story, and it's always family when we are able to get together. So it's a beautiful thing.
All right. I wanted to ask you in terms of when you left. So you were the first. Is it right that you were the first in your family to go out? Let me go out here to college and move away.
Yeah.
And do that.
Yeah, I was, and it was necessary for my growth and development. It was time for me to do that, and it in many ways, as much as you go away and you do your own thing, there was still a tie to the guys. And the reason I'm telling you like that is that I went to Clark, Atlanta University, which at that time was called Clark College in Atlanta, and I studied communications. And it wasn't long after I had left where, like I said, Prince had come out with his first project, and then eventually ended up at Warner Brothers. Now, you do know that he had an opportunity to go to Columbia Records, and Columbia wanted to sign him, but did not want to allow him to produce his own material.
Right.
In fact, Columbia had made an offer and basically wanted to put Prince with Maurice White under his direction of Earth, Wind and Fire. So that Prince would be signed to Columbia as a new artist, but the production element would be under the guidance of Maurice White, and Prince chose not to do that. He wanted to be able to do his own thing, which, at that time was very rare.
Right.
But when you look back on it, you say, wow, he really had a vision for what he wanted. At a time when he probably didn't know what he wanted, but he had that vision to do his own thing. So, kudos to him for sticking to his own beliefs and believing in himself.
Let me ask you this, Kevin, because I just wanted to kind of follow your journey a little bit. So when you go to Atlanta, coming from, Minnesota, Minneapolis, was there sort of a culture shock for you? Because again, coming from an area where there's very little blacks going to Atlanta of all places, right?
Let me give you a real quick story on that one.
Yes, sir.
I have a story specifically about that.
Okay.
I went to Atlanta, had a cousin who lived there, and she lived in Buckhead. So I guess I got to school. I came into Atlanta on a Thursday, and I wasn't able to get into my dorm room until the following Monday. So she let me stay at her house in Buckhead until, my dorm room was available. And I got there on Thursday. On Friday, she kind of, told me about the neighborhood and about the area and what I should expect and all kinds of things. And the next day, she handed me a bus schedule and said, all right, you need to go, discover this and figure it out and find out. So to get from Buckhead to, Clark College at the time, you had to transfer downtown. What was used to be, I don't know if it's still there today, a place called Central City Park. And that's where you get off the bus, get on another bus, and, take a short ride over to the university. And man, coming from Minneapolis, population, the percentage was about 3% African American.
Wow.
And going to Atlanta, which was probably at that time was 60 to 70% black, and getting on a bus in Buckhead, which is still at that time was a predominantly white neighborhood, and you get downtown, and I got off this bus, and I swear to God, I had never seen that many black people in one place in my entire life. And it was like, whoa. And I was like, I was just overwhelmed with emotion because there was a sensation I could not explain. And I got on that bus, and my mind is just filled with all these thoughts about how is it like to live in a place where that many black people were. And I got off that bus at Clark College, and I spent that day walking around that campus, and I saw all those black students and people coming in to get set up for the new year, and black teachers, and then of course all of the beautiful women across the street at Spelman College.
So that bubbling brown sugar.
Because all of this is sitting on the same street. You got to understand, it's like an intersection.
Right.
Clark's here, Morehouse here, Spelman there, down the street is Morris Brown. All of this is bustling with black people. And then you see all these women, and you say, I swear to God, I said, I'm never leaving here. This has got to be the best thing I've ever experienced. And, of course, I had a wonderful, wonderful time at college. I'd love to relive that life again. But anyway, it was a cultural shock beyond cultural shock, but it was enlightening. And it just opened my eyes to all kinds of possibilities. So it was one of the greatest things of my development that I could have ever done, was going to that black college, historically black college, at that time, coming from where I had come from.
I can imagine. When was the first opportunity that you got your first, I guess, radio job? Was that the first thing you got into?
Well, after my experiences, very briefly in Minneapolis, like I said, from the high school experience to the AM daytime radio station to the FM community station KMOJ, and then my first real, learning the process of real radio was happened at college. Okay. So I first started with WCLK, which is the Clark College radio station, and it was a jazz station. So I was a DJ there and helped in the music department. And then eventually, as time went on, I got a job at WIGO, which was an AM station, and WAOK, which also was the AM. You got to remember, there were very, very few urban FM stations, or black FM stations anywhere at that time. This is mid '70s, so they were just coming into to getting into FM at that time. FM was album rock, that kind of stuff. There was very little R&B stations. Most of the R&B stations were AM. So to have that opportunity in Atlanta to do WAOK and WIGO was great. At AOK, I was a weekend, announcer, and then on IGO later, I became 7 to midnight and a music director. So that was my first opportunity to really understand operations of radio and how to be in management.
Can you give us can you give us your WIGO, your lead in, how you would call it?
Man, I was went by the name of Special K, and I don't remember how we did IGO. I don't remember how we did the call letters, man. It's just so long ago. But what I was going to say about that is, while at WIGO, was right after, Prince had launched. I'm telling people about Prince. Of course, everything that you're hearing about Prince at that time was this androgynous, is he gay? Is he black? What is he? Is he some kind of freak? It was all this kind of stuff that was going out because nobody was really, wasn't spin control, wasn't invented then yet.
And for the younger listeners, there was no internet back then, so it was all word of mouth.
There was no internet, so you get a picture, and you might get a story on television or something, and it'd be all just wild. He was Mr. Sex Crazy, and all, it was just so much stuff that was out there that was you get an idea and you run with it instead of there was no investigation into it to know if it was real. And I'm telling people, I know this guy. I grew up with him. He's a great musician. He's incredible, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no, he's some kind of freak. And then, you know, he, by the time he got to Soft and Wet, you know, then everybody's ready to come around and say, okay, yeah, he's really something. But in the meantime, when he launched The Time and Get It Up was out, we had a chance, and I was working with a guy named Jimmy Veal, who was a local promoter, and he booked The Time to come down to Atlanta and play in some club.
Okay.
So it was really the first time for me to see the guys as The Time after, you know, the whole Flight Time thing. And you know the story about Flight Time
yes.
and Alexander O'Neal, right?
Yep. Did you know Alex as well?
Alexander was Alex. Oh yeah. Okay. Alex was supposed to be in the time.
He wanted that paper.
But Alex went to the meeting and wanted the paper, and kept telling Prince, "Well, you know, I need a car, I need a house, I need some money." You know, and at that time, that wasn't really what Prince was trying to hear. And it was an opportunity that he, you know, was all about, let me get paid instead of let me have this chance to do this. And Prince obviously passed on Alexander being in the group. And eventually put out a record, I think it was on Sheena Easton, under the pen name of Alexander Nevermind.
Right.
You might want to do a little research on that.
Sugar Walls.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the producer was Alexander Nevermind, and that was that message to Alexander that you ain't in this group.
Yep.
So anyway, so when I saw Jimmy and Terry and all the guys, you know, it was just amazing to see them out of that context of Minneapolis and on the road and you know, a touring band, even though they were you know all piled up in somebody's station wagon, but still it was great to see them out like that, and that kind of just brought it all home for me. So we had always kept in contact and whatnot, and as the years went on, and I had done radio and then eventually left radio and got into the record business after finding myself in Los Angeles. I had come to L.A. in 1982, and with a cousin who moved out here and just said, "Oh man, this is L.A. I've always wanted to be in L.A. This is great." Ended up going back to Minneapolis, and then eventually really kind of started my professional radio career by going back to Georgia, working at another AM daytime station in Athens, Georgia. I was there for only about 6 months when I got an opportunity to go to a station in Sumter, South Carolina, WWDM, which is still there today, the big DM. And it was my first real programming job. And we took the station from number 7 in the state to number 1 in the state. And, you know, sometimes with success, you know, some people see your success as threatening. And one day the owner walked in and said, "I don't think you really want to be here." I'd been there about a year and a half. Station was doing really well. And he walked in and he fired me.
Wow.
On the spot. And I had no idea why, but I guess he just thought, you know, either I was going to leave or I was doing something he didn't think I was supposed to be doing. And I found myself out of work, and, you know, I started making a name for myself with the success at that station. So I got in my car and I drove to Atlanta and I interviewed there, and there was nothing available. And I drove to New Orleans and interviewed there. There was nothing there. And I drove to Houston and talked to somebody, and they said, "Well, if you can wait, you know, 6 months, I'll have something," you know. And I was really, you know, sad and down in dumps and trying to figure out what was next. You know, I had just gotten married to my wife in Minneapolis, and she was at the end of our honeymoon. She went back to Minneapolis. I went back to South Carolina, and then I get fired. And I was out of work for about a month, and then all of a sudden I get a call from somebody, and I sent out tapes, and they said, "Hey, there's a job in L.A. if you want it," you know. And I talked to a guy, and he said, "You know what? It sounds like with your experience and the fact that you have a degree in communications and that all of that is impressive to me, he said, I'm going to make arrangements to have a plane ticket at the airport. You can come out today.
Wow.
And I got on that plane that day. I interviewed the next day. I got the job the day after that. I went back to South Carolina, sold off anything I had that I couldn't take with me. I drove across country by myself with a trailer on the back of my car. And I came to L.A. and got to L.A. in November of 1984 and was a program director at KGFJ for 5 years.
How old were you at this time?
I was 24 years old.
Wow.
25.
Wow.
So it was a great experience. It was a new thing. It was a challenging thing. It was radio was, exciting then. There were a lot of great things going on at the time, and I was one of the youngest, if not the youngest, major market program director in the country.
What kind of station was this? Was this a black radio
KGFJ was a AM R&B station.
Okay.
It was a historical station for it was a station that Magnificent Montague was at and did the famous Burn, Baby, Burn, for the 65 riots. There are a lot of people that had come through that station were very famous in black radio over the years. And I caught it at right toward the end of the era where Inner City Broadcasting, which owned WBLS in New York and WLIB, owned the station. They also owned KBLX in San Francisco at the time.
Wow.
So my first national program director was Frankie Crocker. And Frankie would come to L.A. and we'd have our meeting, and he'd say, you know what, young man, you do this L.A. thing. I'm going back to New York. I don't care about it. So my experiences with the great Frankie Crocker, probably the greatest black DJ in the history of black radio, was you do it. I don't want to do LA radio. So, but LA radio was challenging because there's so many elements to it that you have to consider. It's not the things that you can do with the black listener base, but you have to include the Hispanics. You have to cross over. You have to do things that are outside of your norm. So it's a different market to challenge. And a lot of people have come to LA trying to do radio and had to learn the hard way that it's not the way you do things in Chicago or Detroit or Atlanta or somewhere else. LA's an entirely different place. And Anthony knows that from living in LA.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, how did you transition from being in radio and then getting into the music business?
Well, after 5 years at KGFJ and being successful in it, I just were looking at the business and looking at greater opportunities. And I think that my interest was really going from playing records to being involved in the making of music and to developing artists and finding talent. So that's really where my interest started to grow. And I got a job as a regional promotion manager for Island Records. Okay. And Island Records was owned by Chris Blackwell at the time. And Chris was a British man, a British Jamaican, who's most notably known for developing, and I can't really say finding, but certainly building Bob Marley and U2. Those were the two big acts that he was associated with, although there were many others, but those were the two biggest ones. And I got a job as a regional promotion person based in Los Angeles. And now what was interesting about that was I was a program director, and I competed against other radio stations. There were 5 black radio stations in L.A. at that time. So I competed against all these guys. Now I got a job where I now have to cater to these guys. So it was a very difficult transition for me personally to go from I'm kicking your ass on the radio today to, hey, man, how you doing? Let's go to dinner, and will you play my record? And that didn't last long for me. And it was good that it didn't last long for me because I had told my bosses that my true passion, my true interest was to do A&R.
Oh, okay.
And what had happened is there was an opportunity at A&M Records after I was only in the job maybe 6 months or something like that. And somebody said, hey, they're looking for an A&R guy to do R&B A&R at A&M. And I went and applied for the position, and they were about to make a decision. And I told my bosses that, hey, I'm just for full disclosure, don't want you to be surprised. I'm, trying to look at an A&R opportunity. And I hadn't met the president of the company. He was, we talked to him on conference calls and whatnot, but never had I met him. His name is Lou Malia. And Lou called me one day, and and there was a little bit of turmoil in our department. People were leaving, and there was transition going on and whatnot. And Lou said, "Listen, I don't know you, but I hear good things about you. I know you're getting the records played. People that I talk to tell me that you're a good guy. I want you to stay." He said, "What will it take for you to stay at the company?" I said, "Well, and I'm saying to myself, I'm taking this A&R job over at A&M because that's what I want to do. This guy's not going to let me do A&R." He said, "Well, I'll let you do the A&R, but I want you to take a bigger role in the development of the department." And I'm like, 30 years old, man. I'm still a kid in this. I know people in the record business. I see what goes on in the business, but I'm like, this is moving really fast. And I said, okay, well, we'll take that chance. So the funny story is, I was making about $50,000 a year. Let's just say that's what it was. And I told the guy, he said, well, what will it take? I said, well, I want $100,000 and I want a $50,000 bonus. Now I say all of this to say, I know he's not going to do this.
Right.
So I said, I'll throw out this number and then I'll go on to A&M with this job that I want to do. And he said, done, no problem.
Next.
And I'm like, my mouth drops. 10 days later, I get a check for $50,000. Now, you're 30 years old, in this what year is this, 1990. You're sitting there, looking at this money and saying to yourself, what the hell? And that was amazing to me, of course. Anyway, long story short, I did Island. First act we worked when I was there was Tone Loc, Wild Thing.
Get out of here.
Went through that. Went through Busta Moves with a Young MC. Worked with Will Downing, with Misha Paris, with Miles J.
Okay.
And made a good name. And at some point in time, Chris Blackwell was vacillating on selling the company, which he eventually went and did to Polygram Records. And there was an opportunity to make a move because it looked like things were not going to be as stable as we thought they would be at Island. And I went to work for, believe it or not, Michael Douglas, the actor.
Really?
Michael Douglas had a record label called Third Stone Records, which was run by Dick Rudolph. Dick Rudolph was the former husband of Minnie Riperton and, of course, a record producer.
Oh, wow.
So we worked on, he had a record called Third Stone Records, and I went there as a vice president of A&R. And the first act I worked on was Nona Gay, the daughter of Marvin Gaye.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Who eventually went on to become a model and actress. But that was a short-lived run as well. Unfortunately, in 1991, my grandmother passed away. I was in Minneapolis for the funeral. And while there, I called Terry, and, flight time was rolling by then really well. And I said, hey, man, I'm in town. I want to come out and see you. She said, man, come on over. And we came over to the studio, and I was blown away by the facility. It was just amazing, what they had built and had gotten to by that time in Minneapolis. basically kind of told him my story and, said, man, it would be a dream to come back and to work with you and Jimmy and, help you, build the label. And he said, by chance, timing is good because we're starting this Perspective Records. And he said, we're running it through A&M, and we need somebody who can be in Minneapolis when we need them in Minneapolis, and in L.A. when we need them in L.A., and to, help build this label. And that's the opportunity that presented itself, and I became Vice President and General Manager of Perspective Records.
Wow.
First act we worked with was Sounds of Blackness, which was optimistic, which we got to a #1 record. Mm-hmm. And their first album, the Evolution of Gospel, won a Grammy that year. The next act I worked on was Mint Condition. And the thing about working with Jim and Terry was that they weren't overly involved with the acts. They would help them, they would guide them, they would shape that career, but they weren't really, so involved with the making of the music that it was them, right, and not the act. So Mint Condition got to be Mint Condition with some direction from Jimmy and Terry, as opposed to Jimmy and Terry going in doing the records. Mm-hmm. Like they did a little more of that with Sounds of Blackness, because Sounds of Blackness was more of a vocal ensemble than it was a band. Right. Although Sounds of Blackness had its own band, but Jimmy and Terry shaped more of the music, on that project. But we did some great things over the next 3 years at Perspective Records, most notably the Mo Money movie soundtrack, which featured Janet Jackson, Luther Vandross, Karen Wheeler, Johnny Gill, everybody, Sounds of Blackness. There was so many acts on that album, and it was a big platinum record, and we were extremely successful with that. So I have wonderful stories and experiences from the time that I was with Perspective Records. To be able to live in LA, commute to Minneapolis, and we spent time in New York, and we did a lot of different things that were innovative and exciting, and built a label and built a staff, and worked with some great people at A&M.
Was there
were our distributors?
Was there ever a chance, or is there ever a talk of Jimmy and Terry actually doing an album on Perspective at all? Like them have a group?
Oh, as themselves?
Yeah, like some sort of group album?
There was. I forget what the name of what they were going to call themselves.
It's like The Secret or something like that, or?
Yes, The Secret. Thank you. I'm glad you're very good at that. They were The Secret. Yes, and there was talk of them doing an album. They've actually been talking about doing that since then. Oh, okay. But yeah, they talked about doing that. But you got to remember, while all this is going on, they're still cranking out music for other people.
Yeah, Janet was huge at this time.
They're still doing their production work, so it was incredible to be in the studio with Janet Jackson when she's in town to work, and we're working on Mint or whoever we're working on, and in the next room there's Janet, and they're doing their thing, or there's Johnny Gill, or there's New Edition, or there's whoever it was at the time. I remember when we were doing the Mo Money soundtrack, one of the most exciting things for me was actually being in studio with Janet and Luther when they did The Best Things in Life Are Free.
Oh, wow.
So we went to the Apollo Theater, which a lot of people don't know. The Apollo Theater has a studio inside of it, and we worked on Big Daddy Kane on a track he did for the album at the Apollo.
A job ain't nothing.
So it was, like I said, it was just a wonderful time to experience the music business, to be in the music business, because we were getting support. We were being extremely successful with our records. We were very competitive. Mint Condition, battled up the charts with Pretty Brown Eyes with Prince and Michael Jackson. Mm-hmm. So there were hits out at the time, and we were making videos, and and doing things, and just it was a very exciting time to be in the business.
Another question, just related to this, because you mentioned Johnny Gill and New Edition, and my understanding is that Jimmy and Terry are either like executive producers of that New Edition movie. That's coming out.
They're a part of they're producers on the movie, yes. Okay. And there will be some new music coming out of that. And I know they're going to be working on Johnny again for his next project.
Oh, okay. I was going to have you seen that?
There's a number of things that are going on with them right now.
Have you seen that movie yet?
No, I have not seen the movie. I talk to Terry every now and then. You know, Jimmy and Terry have relocated flight time to Los Angeles, so I've been to their. They had a studio in Santa Monica, and now they're based in Calabasas. So I haven't been to the Calabasas place, but I've seen them at the place in Santa Monica when they had that. Okay. And there's still a lot of projects that they're involved in, a lot of different things, and they have some young writers and producers that have come into the camp that they're helping develop as well.
All right, let me ask. I want to shift the conversation a little bit. I want to get some of your expertise as someone who's been in radio for a while and has been in the music industry as well, because we're at a very interesting place where we're at now, you know, in terms of those two industries and what they mean to sort of, you know, I want to say the totem pole of importance to young people, because I was a consumer young guy at the time you're talking about, and music was everything. You know, that story you talked about of going to the record store, that was a weekly ritual. You had to go to the record store, you know, and these types of things, and music videos and all that kind of stuff. But now, I wanted to ask you this, because one, you had New Edition, you've worked with them. They are a band, you know, they're a black band. You know, I always put New Edition, Tony. I guess you could put the Roots, but there's so little of that nowadays. And I know that Mint still does their thing. They're out there touring. But I wanted to ask you, like, in your opinion, professional opinion, what do you think has happened with the black band? And when I say the black band, I'm not necessarily talking about, there's always the Earth, Wind and Fires and, you know, some of the legacy acts that tour, but I'm talking about new, young talent on the cusp, that guiding the culture, you know, being the forebears. Why don't we have that anymore? Well,
I think a lot of it had to do with radio.
Okay.
And the problem with the radio, as I see it, has also been the fact that it's now corporate owned.
Mm-hmm. Clear channels.
So when you have corporate owned, and you know, when you have companies, and I don't want to single out iHeart or Radio One or Cumulus, but you know, they make up the bulk of the companies that own black radio stations, and what they do is they want to run these stations like franchises. Mm. So when they do that, you know, we're talking about corporate run or corporate managed playlists. So you don't get the, you know, it's the least common denominator. It's the easiest way to manage multiple numbers of stations is by everybody doing the same thing. It's the menu is the same, the playlist is the same, everything is the same, and we don't have the ability to walk into a situation and really showcase our programming talents. You know, where once black radio was a place where you go to discover new artists. Right. New music, you know, up and coming kind of things, and no longer is that. Now you want to play safe, and you know, it's chart driven, hit driven, you know, the least path of least resistance kind of stuff. So you don't get the variety, you don't get the diversity that you once got. So bands kind of got caught up in, you know, the record companies are not developing bands because they're not putting money into artist development. A band costs more than an individual, and you can go in the studio and create the band sound without having the band. So there's just ways in which you can get around doing that. Now, you see somebody like a Bruno Mars today bringing that all back. You know, I mean, if you listen to his music, it sounds like the 80s again.
Yeah, his new album that's my joint right there.
Oh, it's the bomb. It's the bomb. But you're seeing that, you know, we went through a period with the record companies where they were really trying to maximize the dollars and minimize the expense. And if that be the case, then that means they want to get all they can out of product, but not necessarily invest in development.
Now, is that a particular genre sort of thing? Because, and I'm asking this in the sense of, I still see the white bands all day. You know. Well,
then you've answered your own question.
Okay.
You know, yeah, it is a thing where it's you know, they minimize and marginalize black music. So we don't get the benefit of all that. What we're supposed to do is deliver hits.
Okay.
Not develop talent. Where on their side, they want to develop talent that eventually will deliver hits. We got to come with a hit out the box,
out the gate,
or we ain't going to be there.
Interesting.
I mean, if you just look at, you know, what you're saying, just take a look at it from that lens. That all we're really doing there is providing songs. Okay? So those that do break out into superstar acts pretty much do it on their own. You know, Beyonce doesn't depend on her record label to do what she does. Jay-Z, you know, can pretty much decide what he's going to do. Kanye, all of these superstars, you know, are really not doing it with the support of the record label.
Right.
But the record label's focused on hit songs and not hit acts. And that's why you see, you know, our emphasis is no longer on albums. You know, Apple did away with that when they started selling singles. You know, I mean, notice an album comes out because we're not getting CDs or not buying CDs, or that we're in the download business. You don't see credits anymore. You don't know who plays on what.
Right.
You know, you don't know who produces what. So there's all kinds of things that that affect us.
Let me ask you: in your opinion, do you think when I say us, I'm talking about the black people that love music? Do we still value it the same? In your opinion?
I think we do. I think we consume it differently. You know, I mean, our thing was, man, you know, we're tactical person? We like to touch things.
Yes.
We would go spend time in the record store and flip through the bins.
Right.
You still probably got some records around your house somewhere. Mm-hmm. But that was something that was important to us. So reading the liner notes and seeing the pictures and all of that was a part of that process. You know, now our music is more disposable than ever. Now, to a certain extent, we didn't get taught the way to consume music through the computer. Who was there to do that? You got to pull out a credit card? That wasn't really our thing. You know, we had that $15. We could go down to the store and buy the album.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Now it's a whole new ball game. And we're still late to that game, unfortunately, from a technical standpoint. Not the young people. The young people will get that. It's that 25 to 54 that's still reluctant.
Yeah, I almost feel like they sort of written off that. Like, was like, well, you're not on board with it.
But we still love the artists.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Frankie Beverly still sells out arenas.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Hey, ain't had a record in 25 years. So you have to think about how we consume this now. What's important to us? We will go see R. Kelly. Might not buy his new album, but we'll still go see him. So our love for music has not diminished. The way we consume the music has changed. You know, and this whole thing about the streaming now, you know, I mean, that's really it is in many ways a way in which corporations can take advantage of our intellectual content and not pay for it, or pay
pennies
on the dollar.
Right.
You know, so
it's all,
an artist making money on records is really a thing of the past.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like now all of it is based. It's just it's something to help Google, or I'm just naming companies, to sort of get their foot in the door. Your ecosystem, like it's almost like it's a loss leader, almost like well, it's a loss leader in a sense, but it's also having that content brings eyeballs and ears and whatnot, and then you're trying to sell them goods. Right, that's what I'm saying. So they want to bring you into their
Amazon
system.
Amazon being in the music business is it's retail, but it's also, don't forget to go check out Amazon Prime and all the other services that we offer.
Right.
You know, same with Apple and everybody else. Everybody has something else to sell, and surrounded with all of that music is advertising. So if I can get you to subscribe to my service for $5 a month, but I can have you in my network and sell all this other stuff to you, you know, that may be to my advantage.
Right.
So the emphasis is less on the way, you know, the music, but the fact that I have you, you know, as a part of my consumer base.
Right. Yeah. Buying up all of these libraries or having access to all this libraries of content. Come on in here so you can listen to it. But what do you think that? What would your advice be to an artist? You know, to getting into the game at this point.
Well, you know, you hear so many people say, you know, the music business has changed. It's gotten worse. It's terrible. It ain't what it used to be. And then in many ways, it's probably better than it's ever been. And the reason I say that is because you can do your thing your way, but there are restrictions. So, and then there, of course, there's the, you know, you can flip that and say, you know, that you're unrestricted because of the internet. The problem, the challenge with the internet is that there's just so much content out there that you have to find a way to, you know, to find it and then monetize it. But as an artist, when you ask somebody, you know, well, you want to be in this business, what's the best thing you can do? Well, for me, to start off with, is be talented, A, very talented, and be knowledgeable about the process. Because if you let other people represent you, they're probably going to take advantage of you. If you don't know what you're doing, what you're selling, what your product is, and how you can market it. You know, there's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot of abuse.
All right.
Somebody takes your copyright and uses it, and you don't even know it's being exploited, and you're not getting compensated for that. But there's so many streams of ways to get out there. The question is, how do you protect what is yours?
Okay.
And that's a question that I wish I could answer, because if I can answer how you really protect it, that could be a very lucrative opportunity for me.
For sure.
Well, I think the best way to protect it, you know, Prince was one of the forefathers in leading that charge. Like you said, you know, as an artist, you need to know what you are signing and what you are into. And Prince was out there protecting his intellectual property. A lot of people get caught up in the hype and having their song on the radio, but don't know where else that song is going to be used or who else is claiming ownership to it. You need to know.
I would totally agree with you. But you got when you use an example as Prince had built a brand, built a successful career, so it had something that was desirable. Now, as a new artist that nobody knows, how do you protect what you have when nobody knows it and nobody knows that they should want it? So, you see what I'm saying? It's just, there's just a lot of ways to look at this. The first thing any new artist should do is, if you're going to be, or you're going to seek success, you got to seek success, where you are. If you're coming up in Minneapolis, you should be the hottest thing in Minneapolis. Don't call out to LA and say I got a song and let's go make this happen, and you haven't made it happen where you are, amongst your friends and family. So you start there, you build locally, and then you branch.
Agreed.
All right.
So there are challenges to this. I just think that it can be a very exciting time for a talented artist, because you can work your art. You can be as creative as you want to be, and I think we should always stop, with the labels and the categories and whatnot. That stifles us.
Definitely agreed. Do you think it's a lack of playing live that is stifling the process?
No, but I think playing live should be pursued much more. Performance is that's really where we are today, because again, record sales don't really factor in heavily into a plan by which you're going to get rich, because you can't really track it now. Anybody can take your music, put it up on the net, and you're spending all your time taking it down.
True.
And at some point in time when you're new, you want that exposure.
Right.
So the ability to take your intellectual content and to use it as the conduit for you to get compensated for your performance, that's really the model everybody's following now.
Yeah, it's kind of like,
and it makes sense.
You want
now the next development in all this is probably what Prince showed us about 10 years ago, when he had a concert. You come to the concert and the album is a part of the ticket price.
Part of the ticket sale, yeah.
Yes. That's the next step to this, as I see it.
Well, like you said, going back to Frankie Beverly and Mays, they were here. My client promoted their show up here at Thunder Valley, and it sold out. And if a lot of legacy acts would use that same premise and give it away with their concert tickets, that could put a whole new spin on the way Billboard charts are going to look.
Absolutely. And rather than trying to go put a record out, not receiving any kind of support on it, there's no promotional budgets attached to get it out there. There's no promotional dollars to make sure that it's played at radio, all of that kind of stuff. And then there's no record sales. And then, a distributor is not excited about it not selling. When you can give away, or at least distribute that to, 1,500, 2,000, 10,000, 5,000, whatever people show up at your event per night, and use that as your means of distribution. That makes sense to me.
That would definitely be.
And then you're satisfying your client base.
Kevin, I got two questions that we're gonna wrap up here. So two questions. I wanted to also get your opinion again on where you think where you could see radio going, let's say in the next 5 years, and then hold on, one second for you, and then off of that, we'll go out. Tell us about the urban buzz, right? Okay,
very good. Radio, again, because it's corporate owned and traded on the stock exchange, where you have to reach a quarterly number, in order to maintain your value and all of that kind of stuff makes it very difficult to be creative at. You know, you have to think about how people use radio. And really, it's a commuting tool first and foremost. Mm. All right, it helps you get from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. It's something that's ingrained in you. You know, for the most part, you know, you get in the car, you might turn on the radio.
Right.
You don't walk in the house and turn on a radio.
Right.
You know, but now you've got this device that everybody carries, that they can have access to all types of entertainment. And radio should be a part of that mix more so than it is. But radio stopped, in my opinion, especially when we're talking about urban radio, is giving the consumer what they wanted or what they want. And even if they don't know what they want, give them something exciting to listen to. Too much talk, too many commercials, too much repetition, not enough creativity, not enough personality. They kill themselves.
Wow.
You know, we have an opportunity and an obligation as broadcasters to try to entertain, but also we need to be trying to educate. Because we got too many dummies out here, young dummies. You know, we need to tell them, you know, how to, how to learn, where they can find jobs, where they can find health care, you know, how to improve their lives, how to keep their money. All of those kind of things should be incorporated into what we do, in a free service. You know, because that's really where radio has an advantage, is free to a consumer. Mm-hmm. Now, you want me to, now when we get into pay service, then I should be expecting a lot more than I get for what I'm paying for. And I'm just not seeing that. So the future of radio is challenging. I don't see iHeartRadio being in the terrestrial radio business in 10 years.
Where do you see it?
Remember, it was called Clear Channel Radio.
Right.
Then they changed the name to iHeartMedia. And iHeartMedia is an internet-based service. Mm-hmm. So if I have programming, if I have Ryan Seacrest and I have Steve Harvey and I have all these different shows, I don't need terrestrial radio to get it to you. Now I'm distributing this product through the internet. Mm-hmm. I don't need 60 people at a radio station to deliver that product to you. See what I'm saying? So if you think about it like that, do I really need to have this antenna, this equipment, this liability, this expense?
Right.
So I don't see them in this business. Now, that could mean an opportunity for minorities. Because still we, have a tendency to still like that medium. Mm-hmm. But we got to do a lot better because we're not bringing young people into this.
Okay.
I mean, you find an 18-year-old and you ask them if are they listening to the radio. Yeah. Most of them are going to tell you no. So if you're not growing the business, then where's the business? How does the business grow?
Yeah, I see. Definitely. I listen to local talk radio sometimes, but I find that I am more aware of things like the Breakfast Club, which is a radio thing, but I obviously don't get that signal here in Seattle, but I know of them from the internet. I watch all their interviews on YouTube, and they're very influential for me on that, but I'm very much aware of them. But yeah, I mean, they've taken that and put it onto another medium and probably and gotten to me where they never would have gotten to me otherwise. So I can see a lot of that. Yeah. Right. And you'll listen to those podcasts and those that entertainment on your phone, but do you listen to the radio on your phone? Oh, not at all.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So if you start thinking that you can get all this entertainment, but radio is not part of that mix, then you're not thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And if you get in your car and you connect your car to your radio, or you pair your car with your system, you're not probably pairing it for the use of radio,
right,
unless there's something there that's for you. And I know, I don't know Seattle well, but I know there's not much in the way of black radio in Seattle.
No, not at all. It's we still have an AM station where I don't listen to it. And then at this point now, what I find interesting, and it's probably the same around the country, all the music that I used to listen to from the 80s to the 90s, now those are the greatest hit stations. So I can turn on the AM station and it's just wall-to-wall hip-hop, New Jack Swing and all that kind of stuff. And there's no announcers really or anything. It's just a constant flow. So I'll listen to that at some point because that's my generation. I sort of grew up in that. But yeah, but even that has a short shelf life. Yeah, and they probably change that format every
what I'm saying is that it doesn't. It's not presented in a way in which makes you want to stay. It makes you get excited for a short burst of brief time,
right?
But it's not something that you can stay with, and that's the limits of that format to me.
Understood.
I tell you,
we've had hip hop for a long time and whatnot, but these oldie hip hop stations are so limited in what they're doing. After you've heard the message 5 times in a week, you don't want to hear it again.
That was exactly what I was going to say. I listened to iHeart Radio in San Francisco, right? The 80s iHeart Radio, and they play literally it's like 20 songs that they play over and over again. I hear Madonna, I hear Prince, but I hear When Doves Cry, 1999, Little Red Corvette. Those are 3 songs.
Right, and you say to yourself, he has such a catalog. Is this the only song you can play?
Right,
these 5 songs or 3 songs or whatever it is, that's all you can play, and it just tends to lend itself to the lowest common denominator.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
Now,
even.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, even listening to an 80s channel, I get tired of listening to it because I hear the same stuff over and over again. The 80s was 10 years, right? I mean, there was 10 years of music in there. I should be hearing, stuff from all kind of artists, but just like with any other radio station, it's the same stuff over and over again.
Yeah, no, it's a rare radio station that actually goes the mile. There's a station here, I can't think of the name of it right now, but when you ask about, I think it's KEXP in Seattle. I think it's funded by Paul Allen of all people. So I mean, they have a blank check, but they go in how I wish black radio would be. They'll do. Of course, they'll play the David Bowie introspective and play 24 hours straight, but they'll also play Prince, 24 hours straight and go play the rare stuff. They'll play Stevie and mix it in with whatever's happening today, but they'll play those songs. I wish I could turn on, our quote unquote traditional radio station and hear those songs too. But it's it's not the current song, so they won't play it. But and I get frustrated. So I'm like, man, they obviously care about this. It's like they care more about it. But again, maybe it's a different budget, it's a different company, or whatever it is. But they'll mix it all together. But they're curated to the point where you could tell they really care. And then they'll have the announcer come on and he'll talk about the record. And I remember when this came out, and Prince did this, or Morris Day did that, and then they'll jump into Pearl Jam or whatever, but it's such a respected sort of a play that they present, which I become a fan of.
But that's real programming, and that's really understanding the needs of an audience, and that's what I think that urban radio has lacked in. They think they know what the audience wants, but I don't think they have a clue as to what the audience wants because they don't entertain the audience. It's like background music. You just, it's there, but you're not paying any attention to it. I mean, when you listen to the hip hop station and the turnover on the power rotated song is 45 minutes, and if it's a commuter medium, I live in LA, traffic all the time.
Right.
So if I go from here to the airport and I got to hear Drake 5 times,
yeah,
Drake got it on.
See what I'm saying? Yeah. Then I'm like, you know what? This is why I don't want to hear this.
Right. Kevin, tell us about the Urban Buzz, if you could, sir.
Okay, the Urban Buzz was started in 2002, believe it or not, out of the necessity of having a one-stop for urban information, urban music information, and entertainment news. Because there was a lot of stuff out there. Really, when it started, we still had, it was the magazine era was still amongst us. So there was all kinds of mags and tip sheets, Impact magazine. Gavin had just finished. There were just a number of different sources, BRE and whatnot, and that you could go to. But because there were a number of different sources, nobody really kind of aggregated all of that into one place. So we really started under that premise, is that we were going to be a industry-driven, industry-focused resource for black music news and information.
Okay.
With the emphasis on, on people you knew, people in the business. So it wasn't consumer focused at all. It was industry focused. And that still is the case today. Now, we probably need to look at information in general. Certainly in the last couple of years, our politics have come into play. The whole Black Lives Matter kind of thing now seems to be more important. There are certainly a lot of different places you can find information on the internet and other media about what's going on. Is there one place that kind of defines black life? Not really. So we kind of look at the Urban Buzz as really just a black music entertainment life kind of thing.
Okay.
And we take it from the standpoint that the players already. So it's not somebody, we're not trying to tell you who L.A. Reid is. You should know who L.A. Reid is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I got you. Yep, I'm looking at your site right now.
So we've been doing this now for a while. I have a couple of writers, my son being one of them. He just graduated from Hampton University a year ago in communications. He's one of our writers. We have a writer based in Atlanta. And then we take, contributions from people. You guys have some story you want to tell, and you've vetted it out well. You can place your story, and we'll allow you to do that kind of stuff. So anybody can get involved, and we encourage people to step to us like that. So we have what we do is we have a website that's available up 24/7, and then each week we also do an industry-based tip sheet, and that's really more for the development of new R&B, primarily R&B music that is being worked at radio. So our primary user is entertainment executives and radio decision makers.
Got it. Okay, and that's the urbanbuzz.com?
That's theurbanbuzz.com. THEURBANBUZZ.com. And we offer the service for free. And our motto is through advertising. We use advertising, but primarily the advertising comes from the artists or record labels or management companies or things like that. So.